What is going on, everybody? Bobby Five, going to be joined by Brandon Cruz in a little bit. I'm going to first go over the baseball slate, then we're going to talk about the NFL tonight with I'm playing 4 different slates tonight in the NFL, so that should be fun. Brandon will be here any minute. I'm just going to go through what I'm doing. We'll run a quick build, and then we'll jump into football because I'm pretty sure that's what most of you guys want, right? Again, frustrating day yesterday. Did well. But literally all day long was just absolutely crushing. I had all the right moves except for a few wrong places, and probably overstacked a little bit too much, and maybe should have just spread out with my Barkley, Henry, and Taylor, and Darren Jones, and Jennings. I had those guys everywhere, and I still somehow went from up 50 some odd thousand to winning 5,000. So it was a little tilting. But we move on to another night. Hopefully get back after it and get that big score tonight. Looks like Brandon's going to pop in pretty soon. But I'm just going to run through real quickly what I'm doing on this baseball slate. So I'm only playing 4 medium to largish buy-in lineups. So I want to get, I'm going to get different. I want to try to win the tournament. I'm going to get different tonight. I'll just go through positions sort of where I'm at versus the field on the pitching. I'm higher on Nola than I am anyone else. I am going to be way below on Hunter Brown, and I'm actually going to be stacking a lot of Seattle against Hunter Brown. Look, you got to get different to try and win on these slates. My best ways of doing it were to stack Seattle, stack San Francisco, and to not fully stack necessarily 5-mans to try and get some of the bats I want from some other places. So as of right now, Nola and then Bassett, then Erod, then Houck are my main guys. I will probably end up with a Hunter Brown or a Bryce Miller. Not in the 4 bigger ones, but probably one of the other ones. Maybe in one of the 4 big ones. I might end up with one of them. But overall, I definitely think that Nola and Erod in non-Giants lineups, but I like the stack against him. And Bassett, obviously, when you're not playing Boston. Going into positions, it's kind of interesting because I do think it's more of a slate where you don't need to fully stack if you don't want to. But if you did, again, Seattle, San Francisco, those are my favorites. I have Cal Raleigh as my highest owned catcher. You can see we're getting, significantly lower ownership on him than almost everybody else. My second highest owned catcher, big shocker, Patrick Bailey. I'm very into trying to get pieces of these low owned stacks that I think have potential to put up a number tonight. Moving over to first, I hate that for some reason on DraftKings when they show your exposure, I do it weird. So I'm just going to sort of say what I got here. My highest owned first baseman right now is a combination. It's Bryce Harper and Mark Canha. As you can see, Canha significantly lower owned. Again, definitely some pitch at risk with San Francisco, but you got to embrace some of the risk on the slate like this to try and have a chance that when you're competing against tens of thousands of lineups and you're not playing that many yourself. Other guys, Cassis and Christian Walker rounded out for me. Second base. I love Bryson Stott, but again, I just can't get into as much chalk. So I do have him probably with the field. But my highest owned right now is Casey Schmidt. We'll see how the San Francisco lineup comes out, so I might have to change that. Then I've got Rafaela and Stott as my other ones. Third base. It is, let me just grab my exposure. By far, in a way, my highest owned player is Matt Chapman. Other is Alec Baum. And then we get into shortstop. Let me just move this over. So I'm just trying to keep my screen there. Okay, so I have Tyler Fitzgerald as my highest owned shortstop, followed by Trey Turner. Don't really have anybody else that I'm playing at the moment. Subject to change in a little bit, but as of right now, that's where I'm at. Outfield. So I think also the other one I didn't mention was where I'm not playing Nola. I want to get to some Cubs and look at the ownership you're getting. Nola's only had 3 good starts since the All-Star break, maybe 4. And he's had a lot of games where he struggles. We know this Cubs offense is high octane. They can score a lot of runs. And I think this is a good spot to maybe – I don't want to fully stack them, but I want some pieces of Bellinger. I actually got 40% of them right now. Suzuki, another one I've got 40% of right now. So I like getting some low ownership there. Helio Ramos is my highest owned outfielder. Let me get away from the Cubs here. And followed by Kyle Tucker. Then we get into a bunch of 20 and 40%. Julio Rodriguez, Randy Arozarena, Victor Robles, Jock Peterson, Jason Hayward, Pete Carr Armstrong. That sort of rounds out my stuff for the baseball. We got Brandon in here now. What's up, Brandon? Sorry.
I didn't want to interrupt you while you're going on here.
Yeah. I'm just going to run one quick build here from SaberSim and I'll run it for the lottery, and then we'll move on to football in just a minute. And you cool to talk about the 2-game, and then we'll talk about the 2-game and the showdowns, right?
Yeah. So I'm actually not going to play either of the showdowns. I'm just doing the 2-gamer.
Look at you, Brandon. You're like you're becoming a full slate guy.
Well, like I like the shorter slates for NFL, and typically we only get those on like Thanksgiving and during the playoffs and stuff. So personally, I really like that we have 2-gamers on. I think even next week we have 2 Monday night games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think we do. I love it. By the way, I'm totally with you on that.
No, I think it's way more fun, especially when they're like at the same time. Like I hate wasting the whole like Thanksgiving day for the morning game, evening game. Like let's just get it all done within like a 5-hour window.
Right.
Let's see. Let me know whenever you're done running
That was
that.
I had the biggest nightmare on Thanksgiving on a 3-gamer where I literally hit the nuts in the first game, and I wasn't going to be there. I was just going to be gone with my family all day, so I wasn't going to make any edits. But I was like, oh, I hit the nuts in my first game, so I'll just double check in my big buy-in, and I'll swap to the more logical plays instead of leaving. If I left what I had, one of those that cost you a little more than $250,000. Really,
yeah.
These 2-gamers are brutal. I already am ready for myself to throw not a fit, but just to be upset a little bit later. I'll just finish this build really quick, but you can if you want to start talking about the 2-gamer and what you like. I'm curious to hear from you because
I wanted to actually show my screen.
Oh yeah, let me finish this build real quick, and then we'll
you're good.
Down here. Just want to see what Sabersim is trying to give us.
Especially because at least the way my brain works is, I mean, DFS is just a math problem in general, but tonight is very much, an equation or parentheses with game 1 plus, parentheses, game 2 equals whatever your lineup is or whatever the optimal may be. And I think actually using sims on the individual games gives you a really good lean on what to do in a 2-gamer. But I'll let you get done with your.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I mean, by the way, this baseball slate is sort of like that as well. It's a 4-gamer, and it just feels like for a 4-gamer for baseball, it's really, there aren't that many things to go over. I'm just going to try and see where they're going to end up. I'm going to bet that it ends up getting a ton of Seattle. Before the Sims even ran the contest Sims, San Francisco and Seattle, 2 highest owned, as I predicted, and they will be the 2 lowest owned. And I think that is the right way to play these, especially if you're not max entering, but you're playing a field that allows for 100 plus entries or whatnot. All right, let's see. We ran the sim. We're going to sort by ROI. All right. So yeah, you're getting, this is where what you're getting, and this is sort of reflective in what I'm saying. I'm curious. I'll go to the stack exposures in a second. I really strongly believe that if you're hand building or if you're playing a certain thing, you really just don't need to 5-man stack. I understand if you play 150 and that's your style and that's what you want to do, go ahead. I just don't think there's any logic in doing that, especially considering the majority of people are going to do that just by playing a 4-man stack or a 4-2-2 or a 3-3-2. You're already getting different than a huge portion of the field. And people say, oh, but 5-mans keep winning. And I say, okay, well, you know why? Because 90% of people are playing 5-mans basically exclusively. And if you're going to do the same thing that all of them are doing, where they're playing max lineups and you're not, you're in trouble. So you see, this is what they're getting to. But if you're going to play San Francisco and Seattle, you can probably get away with it to some extent. But if this was me for my builds for tonight for baseball, I would make sure I had at least like 15 from all the 4-mans, and then probably would want 1-3-3-2 or something like that. 10% of that or something like that, and then maybe a little bit left at the 5-mans. But I just do not want to do what everybody else is doing. I do like that they gave you these stacks. These are the ones I think this is the best, gives you the best chance. The San Francisco and Seattle, obviously, it's not going to work out most of the time, but when it does, you're going to be crushing the field. So Chicago's the other one I would get to more. If you're not where you're not playing Nolan, not necessarily not stacks, but play some Bellinger, play some Suzuki. Nobody's doing that against Nola, and I think it's a good way to get different. All right. With all that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're let Brandon share his screen. It's great to be doing a show with Brandon because I like that you have a really a lot of your own really strong takes, and I'm curious what they are tonight. So let's move over to the football.
To the football one. So So since I'm not playing the 2 slates, I'm like, I'm not going to show what I'm doing here. Like if I just did what I normally do for the showdown stuff, but I'm using it in reference to finding what I want to do for the main slate. So let me at least talk for probably 2.5 minutes straight, and then we can go back to bounce ideas off of each other. So, and yet again, the real caveat through this would be, am I using good numbers in terms of good projections? The ownership in these I really don't care about. I'm just concerned about what the points that I'm using are. I just don't want them to be bad. Um, I believe SaberSim is very good with the sims in terms of NFL and not base, or I don't have much experience using the baseball stuff, but for NFL and NBA, like I
Mhm.
would say that they are the best that I've used. So in situations like this, all I'm trying to figure out at this point, and this is what I was doing earlier, all I'm trying to figure out is what are the safer-ish guys that are playing in both these games, and not safe as like oh cash play or whatever, but who is less likely to bust. Okay, now typically I'm not worried about looking at the captain position because I'm only ever playing wide receivers there. But we can use the flex position and see where everybody ranks out in terms of their true viability. Once you run the sims, once you rank them by, risk adjusted ROI, and you can see where typically that exposure in your lineups would end up falling. And you can use that to see when we're comparing with the main slate today of who's more likely to do well, who's less likely to do well, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I'm looking here, I'm not personally for me, I think Josh Allen is overpriced on this slate. And so, yes, sure, he's your highest exposure rate, yada, 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 whatever. But as I go through and I see that like James Cook is popping up in nearly every situation that is viable. And also, this is also why I'm not playing the showdown slates too, because I don't like the builds because it would lean probably more James Cook and builds that I just don't feel comfortable like playing with. That's why I'm focusing
Mhm.
on the two gamer. But like James Cook seems like the best play in the Buffalo Jacksonville game.
Mhm.
And so as I'm like going through and looking at the different types of lineups that even use him, that shows for me, hey, I should probably just play James Cook in the two gamer. He
Mhm.
seems like the safest play on the entire slate of in my opinion, of how they're going to work and so on and so forth. But as we look through Buffalo, we don't really see a ton of wide receivers or the pass catchers from Buffalo in this game, showing up in the exposure rate. If it was, I mean, granted, we have a 5 stack here, but what I'm typically wanting to see is, wide receivers much higher up on the exposure column when I run these sims for these games. And so just right here for me, when I'm viewing this, that's showing that hey, the Buffalo wide receivers are much more shaky, which I mean we already know that, between Shakir and Kincaid not really doing anything, and Allen was like injured last weekend, and so like we don't have a lot to go off of this year alone. But right, just here alone, I'm seeing that hey, Buffalo's kind of shaky in terms of the pass catchers. So if you're playing Josh Allen, not only would you want to, I mean, obviously stack Buffalo, but there's really like no good guarantee like pass catcher plays in this game from like either side from what I'm looking at.
Certainly
And if
no.
anything, go ahead. And I was going to
Sorry,
say,
go
if
ahead.
anything, it's showing that like Jacksonville would probably be the preferred play if you're looking to stack a team from this first game because they're at least more correlated and they're much more closer aligned in the exposure rate of where these teams are going. Secondly, and I'll do this after I look at the second game because I want to show you what I'm typically using this for because sometimes I use this on like 2 game NBA slates as well. When we look at this second game, and we run the exact same like procedure, right? You see Burrow and Daniels there, like of course they're going to be there, but you see like Chase, Moss, even T Higgins up here, and you're seeing that like, hey, Jamar Chase, yet again, is this because we're using good projections? Is it just because everybody's smart? Is it because of what the Sims are showing? But hey, you should probably play Jamar Chase today, and the fact that I get Joe Burrow projected very similar at as Josh Allen at a higher discounted rate with pass catchers that are showing up a lot more in terms of what I want to see in terms of how this game plays out just from this game. Um, like once I get here, I'm like, okay, cool. I should probably start looking for a Cincinnati stack. Also, secondly, side note, typically on like 2 gamers or 3 gamers NFL slates, like the Thanksgiving ones we were talking about, I typically play the underdog quarterbacks that are in the closest game. That's typically how I've gotten differently. It's either like I'm playing Josh Allen on Thanksgiving, or like the best value quarterback and whatnot.
Right.
I don't think you can necessarily do that on the slate because it's for me it seems like uh it's Burrow or you're going to like Trevor Lawrence, which I think that's still iffy. And so as I continue to go through here and to like reiterate kind of where the distribution of like the stack should go, we're seeing that a lot of the highest return on value lineups, and both these are still 5-1s, which would make sense if one team's going to go off and so on and so forth. You win a lot of them. But as we look at the exposure rate or the stack exposure between both these games, and you isolate them for 5-1, so we're seeing what distribution of 5-1s these sims are showing us. When we look at the first game and you look at the team stacks for Buffalo, I know you can't see this side because our faces are here, but right now when I'm just looking at only the 5-stack lineups that I've made here, it's 947. When I isolate that to the Buffalo side, which is the favorite side of this game, which you would look at as, hey, they're the favorites by basically 6 points or whatever, they should carry a much bigger weight and percentage than like 50-50 or whatever. Like it should lean towards Buffalo. Like, would that not be the case, right?
Mhm.
And when you isolate those lineups, you find that these are only 574. So it's actually pretty split between the sims when we look at the 5-1 stacks, and the outcome of both these lineups of 5-1 in favor of Bills or 5-1 in favor of Jacksonville, like that's a pretty similar outcome.
Mhm.
So like when I start looking at that, it's like, man, Jacksonville probably does have a really good chance from a DFS perspective, especially like if you're doing the showdown of like actually working out. Whereas we do that with the Cincinnati and Washington side, when we isolate the 5-1s here, that's a grand total of 1,149 lineups. When you isolate it to just the Cincinnati, we get a huge percentage here. We have nearly 900 lineups of just 5-1 Cincinnati stacks here. So, if you're doing showdown, you probably want to stack Cincinnati here. But not only are we seeing that, we're seeing that Cincinnati is most likely, but it's certainly between the two favorites, between the Bills and Cincinnati. Like the Bengals are probably where you want to go today, regardless if they're the favorites or not. Like just looking at how I approach this stuff, like Cincinnati seems like the much safer and more likely stack to go with, because if we're doing 2-gamer, like you already want to stack like 4 guys on one team, 5 guys on one team, like whatever the case may be. Like Cincinnati, from what I'm looking at, shows that they should probably be the team that you most likely go with. Now, and I'll let you talk in a second, Poppy. I'm
No,
almost
do your
done.
thing. Do your thing.
When I look, and I already have my lineup made, and then luckily it's not any of the main ones that are shown here. But when you then compare that, now yet again, the projections are the exact same because we're using SaberSim, and the player projections are the same between if it's showdown or whatever. But once we go through that, and you start looking at the distribution of the wide receivers and the where these guys fall out, you still kind of see the same thing. Like, sure, Shakir is the highest Buffalo guy, but you're still seeing that, Jacksonville and Cincinnati are still, managing to be like the top percentage guys here, and Buffalo is pretty low. Especially when we start looking at, Josh Allen, possibly holding like anywhere from like 30 to like 35% of the ownership. And the stacks are looking pretty horrific with Buffalo. That makes him, for me, seem like a pretty bad DFS play on this type of slate. And as you just kind of go through, like you can see the running backs as well. Yet again, Cook is the highest here. Etienne, Zach Moss, and the 2 running back guys. Like Buffalo is nowhere to be found. So where I'm at right now is leaning heavily towards Cincinnati and leaning heavily towards either just Travis or any of the 2 Washington running backs and stuff. But this is basically like my practice or my process, like summarized in like 4 or 5 minutes, however long I've been talking here. But this is like everything I've done to get to any of the
Mhm.
responses or questions Bobby may ask me going
Mhm.
forward here. And I just wanted to show that first and foremost.
Now I got nothing to say. You just nailed it. No, I'm just kidding. No. I like that. Okay, so a couple things. So I actually do like for showdown stuff. I like trying to have a take on the game and trying to play out a narrative that works, especially if it's a contrarian one. Cincinnati and I'll get to Cincinnati, Washington in a second. I'll just real quickly talk about Jacksonville, Buffalo. I like Jacksonville in this game. I think Jacksonville wins this game. I don't usually feel that strongly about these things, and but I really like them to at least cover. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Jacksonville's better than they've played. I think the Bills are a little bit overrated and don't have, as you mentioned, that reliable pass catcher. I too would rather side with taking the passing angle from Jacksonville. Now in showdown, there's no way in a million years I'm fading Josh Allen at all. Maybe 1 or 2 lineups I might. I just don't see how the points don't get there in a showdown slate. Like even he and Cooks are going to get there almost all the time because the rushing upside, and even if one of his receivers doesn't go off, he's going to, he's got a good chance to get in the end zone himself with his own legs, and he can get there with Cooks. So you can just play those two. I like going 4-2 Jacksonville on the other side of it. It also it's tricky to get everybody in there, but like I'm just pulling up I had the wrong screen pulled up. I'm trying to look for my showdown screen.
Yeah, you can take it back over. I also agree. Like I think Jacksonville is very live tonight.
Yeah.
In beating Buffalo.
Yeah, and they have look the cool thing about this from a DFS perspective is like, okay, there's a lot of guys, but there's none we feel totally secure on, and it's why it's hard to play on full slates. Like, are we pairing Allen with Shakir? Are we pairing him with the most talented receiver on their team is Coleman, but he's still a rookie and he's trying to get his feet under him. So it's kind of hard to figure out who to pair him with. I love the idea in Showdown. I'm way over the field on Matt Collins. I actually have Matt Collins captained. It's Matt Collins, the captain, is basically the way you can get to Lawrence, Cook, Etienne, and Allen. And he's going to be less than 0.5% owned at captain. Sometimes the things work where you want the guy who scores the most points in the captain. Sometimes you can literally, we saw a 0 win because it was the only way you could mathematically get in all of these guys for $1 million. And it's just completely wild. So I like the idea, and I'll show this is sort of my exposure when I got my first runs. I've sort of made some tweaks since then, but I have Strange as my highest owned captain. I do have a little bit of the Cook and Allen, and I've sort of tightened this up a little bit. I've got I think I'm up to 10% of Kincaid, and I think I'm up to 10%. 10% of Gabe Davis, 10% Matt Collins. So I'm a little bit spread out because I like playing. It's a little bit roulette with these receivers, but they're all coming in so low owned, and it does allow you to differentiate your build. The other thing I did just for showdown purposes for this, I expanded my pool. I'm leaving like 7,000 on the table in some lineups. This is a weird situation because we don't know. Like Matt Collins could easily be the highest scoring receiver for Buffalo. So just playing him over either Shakir or Coleman and just leaving that extra money on the table, I think is a route we've seen win consistently over and over again. And it's something that I really like tonight. And I'll jump really quickly to the Washington-Cincinnati game and sort of what my thoughts are for that one. I'm just going to grab my ownerships, my actual exposures on my other screen. You can see a captain I don't love Terry McLaurin as much as the field is supposed to on the 2-gamer. I love McLaurin in general. I have not looked like he can connect with Reed yet. But when I saw his projected ownership as a captain, I thought it was a great chance to take advantage of that because the Bengals can win this game with both running backs scoring touchdowns. And I think I love the double running back stack for the Bengals. And then you run it back with the McLaurin and Jaden Daniels, which is not going to be off the board captain. But I like getting to these unusual captains. The other one is the questionable T. Higgins. Everybody seems to be afraid that they're not letting us know really how much he's going to play. I'm going to treat the showdown especially like he's going to be regular T. Higgins and get the regular reps. I also think it's worth speculating somewhat in the 2-gamer and playing a little Yosevich because he's getting such low ownership. But you can see this is sort of where my captains are. Again, I'm going to tighten this up. And the other favorite play I have in that same coming back thing, so I like the Daniels, McLaurin with Eckler as my sort of core for Washington in the showdown side of it. And I love Eckler as a captain. I think he's going to be the captain of my biggest buy-in. I'm not 100% sure on that. He's a little more expensive than I want to pay, but I could easily see a game script where he puts up one of those old Chargers-style games and he puts up like 30 fantasy points because he catches like 12 balls as they're trying to come back. Now, they even in that situation, they still might give some love to the other side of it, to Brian Robinson. But I think Eckler is there, and I think they're going to try to use that experienced guy there. They want to go in there and be competitive. I can see Eckler getting a lot of run in that situation. And you can see I was just trying to get off of the chalky things. I'm happy to not play the Burrow captains. I ended up with, I guess, 6% of it, but nothing in my higher buy-ins. I did love the idea of taking a shot on the other receivers from Washington, get a little De'Ami Brown. The other one is the Eric All situation. People are going to play him in the flex. He's 200 for Cincinnati. He's really it sort of feels like it's game chasing, but if nobody chases it, I'll chase it. He had 4 catches in the last game. His snaps are going up. He's a rookie that they like a lot. So I'm taking Eric Hall as my 200 guy in those lineups. You can see I've got almost 50% of them in the flex, and I've also got him in the captain in I think 5% or so, or 6%. Yeah, 6.7%. So that sort of is a little bit of what I liked for the showdowns. But I thought you made some really good points that are looking at it from a completely different angle than how I look at it. I'm really trying to. I want to get both running backs in a lot of lineups. You know what I mean? You can see my build right here, like at the top, this Brian Robinson as captain, and that one with Eckler in that same lineup. I love the double running backs on these showdown slates, and people just hate doing it. So that just means I'm going to do it all the time.
That's the way I'm really leaning with mine. Yeah. Like I think it's going to be a full-on Washington Cincinnati type of stack lineup, with probably like Cook as the one offer. I'm not sure if I'm going to use Cook and the Bills defense, or even the Jags defense. I'm trying to at this point I have my line figured out outside of like two positions, but I really like playing Robinson and Eckler together today.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and especially in the showdown thing, I think it's great. All-Star DFS is asking what big buy-ins do I play. So I'm playing the 333. I played one of the Wildcats in the showdown. I'm playing the 222 for the other showdowns. They don't have the 333, and then I'm playing 3 in the 333 of the two-gamer. I've done well with these afternoon slates and stuff. So I think I've won every afternoon slate that I've played this year so far. So the smaller games, I'm just sort of going to, keep going after it. So I'm playing 3 in that, and then I'm playing like 40 of the lottery basically at each of these things. Some of them I think I'm like 30, maybe 40, 40 and some, 30 and some. But that's sort of what I got. I really like, but I just want to reemphasize that I really like the idea, and we'll get into the two. I'm just going to get in my two-game thoughts in a second. But I really like the idea of playing this game, especially for showdown, but in the two-game slate as well, as if Jacksonville is going to win this game. I think it's a game that's very winnable, and I feel like everybody's natural instinct is to assume the Bills are going to kill them here. The Bills are the most overrated team in football. I don't care if they win 40-0 tonight, it's not going to change my opinion. I really think that they're underestimating not having a real go-to receiver.
Yeah, dude, they were bad because I unintentionally watched every Bills game and every Dolphins game last year. Those are the only two teams I followed. And so dude, the Bills were horrific last year, even with Diggs and Gabe Davis and stuff. It's a horrible team. And I mean, Allen is that good.
Yeah.
But it's also Allen. He throws, and he hasn't thrown an interception yet this year, but he also didn't throw last week.
Right.
But this is a game to me of where Allen's going to try and force stuff to happen, and I would not be shocked to see Allen throw 2 interceptions today.
Yeah, I mean too. Just speaking on that note, Josh Allen is for the first time he's never gone the first 3 games of his career without throwing an interception, and he's tried 2 no interception games in a row. So I think it's going to come back to bite him tonight. I totally agree. Also, 5 years, it's true. We've been treating this Bills team like they're the second best team in football because they had one incredible playoff game where they probably should have won against the Chiefs. That was one game in the last 5 years, and every year, all we hear is about the Bills are going to win this. The Bills aren't winning the Super Bowl this year. It's just never, ever, ever, ever happening. That's just my take. And I love Josh Allen. I think he's a great quarterback. And I think James Cook is one of the best running backs in football. Maybe I would argue that he's maybe the most underrated. I think he's probably the 4th or 5th best back. So they have 2 great pieces. It's just not a complete team in my opinion. They got very, very lucky to win week 1 against Arizona. Anyway, getting into the showdown part of the 2-game side of this. I'm curious to where you ended up. So you mentioned some of the things that tied in, but I'm having trouble remembering all of it. Who did you end up with the most, or who did you end up with the most exposure to if you were playing more? And what did you end up with so far?
So, and I also going back to answer everything, just to give context how I play, how I find success in NFL. I just play single entry stuff. So every single entry, under $30 that I'm in, all these stupid 12s that keep popping up with 300 people in, I'm just going to keep entering those for the next hour.
Yeah.
But for me, I really like Mike from Cincinnati, Strange from Jacksonville, and I think those would be the only 2 that I would actually bother playing. I'm probably not going to be on Ertz. I'm not playing Kincaid for sure. Highest ownership, I think the most likely to fail, straight up. And if everybody's going to be playing, Kincaid, whether they have Josh Allen or not, you play Mike from Cincinnati, that's already a different way to get, have part of your 4 stack in Cincinnati, is have, the tight end that's, he's going to come in at 23 ownership. You know,
Mhm.
we don't have to get crazy with our like one-offs. Like the tight end position is a really great place to get different, especially when there isn't like a big name on a short game slate, where everybody's kind of, you know, projected very much the same. I might as well just count him um, in my Cincinnati stack. But him and Strange would be the two guys that I go to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was looking at like for this is my early builds again. I'm all gonna change it all like when I go after we're done with all this stuff. But for my early build, this was what I was getting to. Now, what I'm forcing in more of is I really want to make sure I get more of Lawrence and more of Jaden Daniels. And the strategy, what I'm going to do by hand, and Rodeo was writing a little bit about this, and something I've seen a lot of other like people like Squirrel Patrol won $1 million doing it, I think. But it's basically stacking the other team, stack the Bengals receivers with Jaden Daniels. Or stack the Jacksonville receivers with. If you're playing Josh Allen, don't feel the need you have to play Kincaid, or play him with Cooks, and then put like 2 or 3 receiving options from Jacksonville. You really, the name of the game is getting different, and because we have such variance with some of these receivers today, that's what I would try to do. This is the exposure that I got to, partly because I wanted to force it. I wanted to be overweight Gabe Davis, you know, again, only slightly overweight at the moment. I want to be overweight Brian Thomas. There's no way I can justify not playing a good amount of Chase because there's really not all that much else to spend up for. But I thought I was going to be over on T. Higgins, but the ownership got the guys who I've really taken a stand on those. Again, Mac Hollins isn't over 20%. Actually, he's higher. He's like almost 30% of my 2-game slate, which again could be. It may not make sense. It just has to work one of these days. It could be like week 1. He has 10 fantasy points, and that might be good enough at 3,100. Again, I'm a little bit over on Coleman. Nobody else I'm making a really giant stand on, but the one I'm gonna go back and hand edit is I'm gonna make sure to add Noah Brown and De'Ami Brown as my other pivots. I basically want to have like at least half my lineups with one of these home run hitter, with one of these taking a shot guys, Hollins, Noah Brown, and De'Ami Brown, because everybody's going to assume that it's only going to go to receiving wise to Terry McLaurin. And you see how high the ownership is on McLaurin, which is why I tried to fade him. Honestly, that's the weirdest part. I've played McLaurin the first 2 weeks of the full slates. And I've seen that they really don't connect together very well. So they're going to at some point, and I hope it's not tonight, because I am going to be on the lower end of playing McLaurin. I'm trying not to do it. What do you think about what do you think about some of that stuff? And then what are some other ways that I guess that I might be not getting different enough, or maybe I should look to get a little more different?
So I could be wrong. We do have, an hour before the slate lock, so somebody could, correct me, or at least do your own research and stuff. But I'm pretty sure the Bengals have injuries to their either defensive front or middle linebacker, in that range. And they've been funneling their defense to pretty much pushing out the passing on the first 2 games of this season. So for me, I think that hurts McLaurin even more. And I just think that kind of forces Washington to be throwing to Robinson and Eckler as soon as, Daniels looks and he doesn't have a wide receiver open. I think he's going to do a lot of just check downs to his running backs today. So not only through their rushing attempts, I think I would not be shocked to see Robinson be or end with the highest amount of receptions. Or
yeah, I think
not. I mean, he might have 3 to 4. McLaurin.
But I'm telling you, there's a game script where he has 3 or 4 potentially, but there's a game script also where Weston Eckler has 11.
Yeah,
that's really on the table. I mean, he's got a massive ceiling for the role they could use him in, and as does Chase Brown on the other side. So as I rerun things later, what I'm probably going to do is probably do something like literally make a really strong commitment to basically all the running backs, get overweight those positions, but then also make sure I fade. Right now, I have way too much of the Etienne. He's the one I feel more comfortable fading than Cooks. But again, it's not a comfortable fade. But it's I'd like to get to some of the Eckler, Chase Brown, and maybe leave a little bit of the Moss and the Etienne out, and use Eckler, Brown, and Robinson with Cook more. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Just based on ownership, game theory, and potential game flow situations. It's interesting on FanDuel. I just want to touch on this guy. I know you're not looking on FanDuel, but I did. It's really hard to spend your money on FanDuel, which means everyone's going to have the same builds. I think Jamar Chase is going to be 95% owned over there. if you have it in you, that's something you could consider fading. I'm only playing one, like I'm playing a big buy-in small field tournament, so I don't. My current thing, the guy I threw in to get different was Josevic, sort of going against my. Okay, people are a little bit overrating the situation right here they're weird with T Higgins. Like they don't really want to play him, but they kind of don't know. They just don't have any idea how much he's really going to play. And I think he's going to play, but if he doesn't, and even if he does, Josevic had plenty of games when those two guys were healthy, and so did Tyler Boyd before him, who was the third receiver. He had many games where he was the highest scoring player. So I'd like to get to some of the Josevic just because it makes nobody's going to want to build that way on FanDuel. So I just wanted to throw out the FanDuel thing really quickly because you look at it's really hard to use up your salary on FanDuel, and I mean, it's like you have to, but it's going to lead you into the exact same kind of build. And I like Eckler more on DraftKings, but I think you'd have to do something like that, and instead of like ATM straight up against. But it's so hard for either Robinson or Eckler to straight up outscore Cook and ATM. So I'm kind of struggling with my build over there. But right now I have Josevic in my big buy-in, and I'm not sure how good I feel about it at the moment, to be honest. Anyway, we can jump back over to DraftKings. I just wanted to touch on a little bit of the FanDuel stuff. All right, so let's go. Wait, sorry.
No, I was going to and lastly for me, like typically, you do want to get different or whatever, but the fact that I have very little interest in McLaurin and he's projected to be the second highest wide receiver, and I'm not playing Kincaid, like that's removing me from quite a lot of like different builds, or not different, but quite a lot of like standard builds that are like, oh, I need to force in, McLaurin or whatever the case is. Like I'm not really truly concerned about like donating money right off the bat. Like typically, at least for me, there'll be spots in these games where like, oh man, like my lineups could be made and broke on like what these two idiot value guys that I have do. And this slate for me is not one of those at all. Like I don't feel like I'm hindering on what my value play does or whatever. I think you could have really good lineups today by just not being as heavily on Buffalo. And I don't even think that's like a dumb thing to do. Like that's just kind of where my feel is on this whole slate, which we talked about, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for sure. I'm just making one quick change to my baseball lines because I had to get the baseball's about to lock in 3 minutes, and I had to make some changes from things the guys who aren't playing. I'm just gonna figure out how to do this really quickly. Sorry for the.
No, you're good. I can take over while you
take over, yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I want to say that lastly, when we, at least for me, like the two, I know I just said, oh, my lineup isn't gonna like live or die on like one of these stupid plays. I really like Chase Brown today as like just a play in general, just to get different. I don't think he's that drastically different than Zach Moss. I mean, fantasy wise, Moss has performed these last 2 weeks, but they have been wanting to not have Zach Moss be like the full guy running like 75% of the run or 75% of the snaps. And we haven't seen that yet through these couple weeks. They've been saying that they wanted to get Brown more involved. If that is really what they mean, like week 3 would be the week that you start seeing their snap shares at least get closer together. And at 4,500, project like just a mean projection of 8 from Chase Brown with Zach Moss being 15, even if Moss hits somewhere around 11 or something, like if Brown is scoring you 6, 7, 8 points, he will be at least like the 4th best running back on the slate. Like there'll be people scoring lower than him. So I think Chase Brown's a really good play today.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that it works great for Showdown, and it's good in the multi-way slate. It's an interesting slate because I actually found that there's like I realized that I always look at on these little slates, what would I have played on the full slate? I probably would have had some exposure because they'd be very cheap to the Buffalo Jacksonville game, and I definitely would have had some exposure to the. I'm always going to have Jaden Daniels. I've made a promise, basically going to be 10% for me every regular slate because he's got a ceiling that we just haven't seen yet. You know what I mean? And just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean there will be a time where he'll be priced not quite at Lamar level, but just beneath that. So that's where I'm at. There's a question here for you real quick. Jags are without some O-line and D-line guys. Bills are without some defensive pieces. Yeah, this part I know. Lawrence will be under a ton of pressure all night. It's very possible that he is, but I think that in order to get different, you're going to want to be over the field on him. What do you think about that, Brandon?
I don't know. I'm like, but what about the Cincinnati? That's what I don't know about.
Right.
Like, dude, I don't know ball like straight up, like football, like don't like, dude. Whatever Twitter is telling me, it is hysterical. Like the amount of information that I'm just ignorant on in terms of football. Like I do not know football at all. So
Yeah.
like, Pope, you could very much be correct. At that point, I would just default to the projections. All I know is I was listening to people much smarter than me today talk about how the running side from Washington is very much in play today, and that's what I'm basing a lot of this off of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm agreeing with that too. All right, guys, any other questions or thoughts? I've still got a bunch of editing and rebuilding to do, and I just want to make sure my baseball lineups don't go completely nuts, but I still have a little bit of time. So if there's anybody with any questions or thoughts, I'm happy to go through it. I did want to just say, like, sort of for my bigger buy-ins today, just sort of like say, again, in my biggest buy-in for this, I'm going to have Trevor Lawrence as one of my quarterbacks. I'm going to have Jaden Daniels as one of my quarterbacks. And I might, for my third one, probably just use one of those two again. And it really is, the name of the game is getting different. And one thing about Lawrence being under pressure, just to speak to that point, this guy has a massive rushing ceiling that we really haven't gotten to see yet. And I'm going to die on this hill. Like, I don't care. I'll take it. I still think he's going to be a really good quarterback. I was the one who believed in Sam Darnold for all these years because everybody was saying, every GM was saying, we would love that guy. We would love that guy. We would love that guy. I listened to a million NFL podcasts. And we know how talented Trevor Lawrence is. I feel like with the pricing being lower, the fact that everybody's sort of off of him in general, we don't know which receiver and all this stuff. It's Brian Thomas, by the way, in general. That's going to be the normal one. But I really think getting overweight that whole Lawrence in the passing attack, and then as we mentioned, the running side of Chase Brown, I actually think is a great point. But both sides of the Washington running backs, I think, are really interesting as well.
I will add this lastly, because I am seeing with Pope and people are putting also Rhodey. I meant like the running side of Washington, or like
the running side,
the rushing, whatever. Like I don't know ball. But I will say that I think if the Bills do win, I think it's absolutely through their defense. Like I do not believe in the Buffalo's offense at all in this game.
Yep. I think it'll be a year before Coleman becomes as good as he's going to be. I think he's going to be really good, though. I actually have a good feeling about him for the future, but he's very young, very raw. All right. Anything else, guys? I'm just sort of looking around here to see what else. This is, again, these exposures are no longer where I'm at all. This is just what the initial builds with the Sims got me, and then I've made some changes to everything, and I'm going to go back through and rerun everything again. But yeah, what's crazy? They made the Bengals defense on FanDuel, just to give you an idea.
I heard about that. They're the cheapest, right?
They're 3,100 versus like everybody else, like 45, 49. And it's just like bizarre. It's like, okay.
That's crazy, man.
But it's bizarre to play. Like, I was trying to find a way to get different. I was like, but I just think it's the right thing to do, like, just to play them. But if I wish I just didn't know anything at all, because I would just go, oh, that's easy. We'll just fade the team, because they might be like a 90% on defense or an 80% on defense. Mm-hmm. It might even be higher, actually. It's just crazy.
And I mean, defense is the most variant position. Like, you can't project that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I do stupid stuff. I put money on dumber things. I would personally, like, I would probably not play the Bengals on FanDuel. I'm debating really not playing the Bengals defense on DraftKings today. And I'm really just debating on if I'm playing the Jags defense or the Bills defense. Like, that's probably going to be my last, like, 1v1. And, like, dude, the Jags aren't owned at all in the defense. Like, if you want a chalk lineup and you play the Jags D, like, it's a great way to get different, because the Jags are looking like they're going to come in from anywhere like 9 to 13% owned.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For what it's worth, I think we should be leaning less on Burrow on these slates in general. That's just my take. I understand how it works with the pass catching and everything, but I really don't think it matters. I want to be underweight Burrow the most of any of these quarterbacks. All three of the other ones have the rushing upside that I want, especially the Jaden Daniels and of course Josh Allen. But I want to remind everybody, with everybody talking, there's been a lot of talk about how Jaden Daniels is struggling, all these things. Just to give everybody, make it clear to everybody, Jaden Daniels has been he and Josh Allen are within 0.2 points of being this, the second highest scoring quarter. Actually, now they would be the highest scoring quarterbacks of the season so far. So Jaden Daniels, as he struggled his way and D Pope is saying that he's only moving when he has to. I'm not buying any bit of that whatsoever. I don't know where that came from. He's run the ball 26 times in 2 games, and that's the most of any quarterback in football. So I'm not going to buy that Jaden Daniels is not going to be running the ball today. He's absolutely going to be running the ball. But I still like the running backs as well. I think that's the way they're going to try to keep it close. And then Cincinnati, when they pull away, they'll have to air it out, and then you're going to see the Eckler dump down. That's my guess. Okay, question for me this time. Do we think it's possible the Bills get a lead and just milk the game? I don't like the Bills tonight. Davis, definitely play some Davis for sure, but I wouldn't be playing him on them. No, they're not going to. The Bills aren't good enough to be milking anything like that. I mean, the Bills almost got curb stomped of week 1, and then they just somehow Josh Allen basically one man showed his way up. He brought them back. But I do not want to play Davis on the 2-game slate. I do want to play Davis in Showdown. I like the double running back ideas from Cincinnati. I like the double running back ideas from Washington, but I'm not going to get to the double running backs from the first game. I'm sorry, from the Jags and Buffalo.
I do want to say really fast, we now have a third $20 today. Like the first $20 filled up. They put a second $20 up. We now have a third one.
Oh my
God. 3,500 people. I guess I got to enter that one too because I'm already in the other two 20s.
This is the thing that everybody's doing now. Like there's people love these Monday things. Everybody complains about it. Like, oh, we could use that game. We could put it here. We could play a different day and all that stuff. And every time it happens, these things sell out. They sold out like some of these tournaments that I was playing, like literally like 10 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
Nuts. And they're like big tournaments. You see, they just entered what they just posted, Brandon. There's the super one. They're making a 33-33 at the end of the year, on the December 29th, and it's going to be $2 million for first. It's a $20 million guaranteed prize. $2 million for first, $1 million for second.
That's crazy.
So hopefully things are going well, and I can take a couple cracks at that one. I don't know if they just Brody. They did have him. They had it's a $500,000 for first that I'm in. So it's not like they didn't have a big tournament. Even the Wildcat was a $200K for first, the 333. You don't see that very often on the Mondays. So I actually kind of like the way that they did it personally. But
and do they normally? I mean, I'm never looking this high. Do they normally have 2 Wildcats? Because they have a second Wildcat today.
Is there another one? Because that's probably because they think the other one's going to sell out.
Yeah. I mean that's good. Everybody's like DFS is dead, but man, NFL's still carrying it, man.
The NFL is a whole different ball game. That's what I've learned. It's just people. Even if people say there's people out there who just say, "Oh, I hate sports," but they're like, "Oh no, but of course I watch the NFL. Of course I'm in a fantasy football league." You know what I mean? All right.
Yeah. Just real fast. Meanwhile, the NASCAR slate on Saturday filled like 4 hours early. We didn't get like anything later, and then they cut this week's GPP down from like 16,000 to 9,000 people. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
NASCAR gets no love. We just get killed because of the NFL.
Oh man, that sucks. And now even like baseball tournaments are mostly pretty dead right now. No one really wants to talk about baseball anymore. Tomorrow will be like the last real day. It's also so. By the way, just a reminder to everybody who is playing baseball tonight. Keep an eye on everything that happens, and there is going to be, like I mentioned, on Friday, there was 13 players scratched after the first game locked. Because when teams are out of contention, anything that happens, they're going to sit the guy. If there's any tweak whatsoever, or if they're in the postseason, they're guaranteed, or that anything. Just be very careful with that stuff. All right. So Depot has a question about the showdown captains for the Bills game. I'll go through what I've got here. I always like to spread out at first and then try and tighten up a little bit. But I ended up with Strange, and I think it's actually very viable. It's hard to get to Cook, Allen with like one of Kincaid, Shakir, Kirk, or Lawrence or something like that, or Etienne. There's a lot of guys worth spending up for. I think Strange allows you to do that. So I got to a lot of Strange, even though it's not, these exposures are no longer accurate. The other ones that I would take some shots on, I like the Mac Hollins. I actually have him higher than this now. I like the Gabe Davis, and but again, I'm going to be looking contrarian ways. And now that his ownership has dropped, I would take some shots with Travis Etienne. Early in the day, that we had him projected at like 15% owned as a captain. I wasn't buying it, but at 7%, I think you take that shot. But I'm going to always try to be contrarian and either play receivers at captain or a super cheap play that I just don't think people are on. That's not what I'm going to do in every lineup. That's what I'm going to do in the majority of most of my lineups. So I'm going to end up with a lot of different versions of these guys because it does a little bit roulette with these wide receivers.
And what I would do if I was playing that game is I would play Josh Allen and James Cook in the flex.
Yeah.
And either Shakir in the flex as well, or just those two and do a 4-2 in favor of the Jaguars. That's what I would do if I was playing that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, it's been fun, guys. I'm gonna finish my builds and make sure that I didn't leave anybody in the baseball slate that actually didn't play. No, it was the Giants game. Okay, good. So I have some time on that one. Anything else before we get out of here, Brandon?
Real fast, this is for you. Do you think Ohtani will get 60 for 60?
I think it's ridiculous that it's become a conversation. He basically has to homer out, but he's been doing it. Dude. I mean, I'm so tired of it's such a bad look in society to me that while Ohtani is doing all of this, people are complaining, oh, but they didn't want to pitch to Judge when he hit a 60-something. I'm like, oh, because he doesn't walk enough. I'm like, we're going to criticize this guy who's like doing things that we've never seen before and also is legitimately going to be a top 10 pitcher in baseball next year.
Yeah,
we're just going to criticize him for no reason. He's a great guy. He's great for the game. He's bringing a huge influx into Los Angeles and into baseball in general. And I hope to God he does get to 60-60. I was my dad's birthday yesterday, and I'm talking to my DraftKings host, and I said, "Look, you got to get me some playoff tickets for the first series, so I can take my dad to the game."
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
he loves. I mean, my family is like, if you think I like sports or a team, they watch every like Dodger pregame show, game, and postgame show. Like,
it's like a 6-hour event for them every time.
Yeah, that's like what'd you do today? Oh, Dodgers were playing. That's it. Postseason does not count for 60-60. Otherwise, he would maybe make it. Hey, appreciate all you guys for being in here. Always good to see you, D Pope, Eagles, Rhodey, obviously, Brendan, All-Star, everybody. Good to see y'all. We'll be in the Discord if anything else comes up, and happy to have continue any other conversations in there. With that said, for Brandon, I'm Bobby saying.